The clock read 3:12 a.m. when the warm yellow glow of the lamp flickered for the last time that night. In the small red brick studio hidden among Brooklyn's quiet streets, Evelyn's hands, those of an elderly seamstress, danced across the raw linen. Every stitch, every thread she pulled carried the weight of decades, stories of families long lost, promises whispered on cold nights, and secrets that never dared cross the threshold. Evelyn didn't need words. Silence was her language, an embroidery, her journal. In those early hours, she chose a deep blue thread, so dark it was almost black, to trace the initials of a name only she knew by heart. The fabric, soft and warm, had once belonged to someone who no longer exists, but who, in some inexplicable way, still inhabited every corner of that studio. Across town, in a penthouse of glass and steel, Lauren Whitmore, the youngest millionaire on the local Forbes, couldn't. The Egyptian cotton sheets felt rough against her skin, and the midnight quiet was broken only by the sound of her own heart. Lauren was afraid of dawn. She dreaded what might come to light when the morning sun spilled into her sanctuary of luxury, exposing the cracks she hid beneath designer dresses and carefully practiced smile. That night, as Evelyn embroidered by the glow of the lamp, Lauren replayed their last meeting in her mind. Evelyn's steady gaze, her hands etched by time, and that old handkerchief she had insisted on returning. Handkerchief that had once belonged to Lauren, who had passed away years ago, and that carried an enigmatic embroidery, possible to decipher at first glance. Before we dive into this story, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, sit back and enjoy. The day broke gray over New York, with heavy clouds pressing down on the building, smothering any promise of sunlight. Lauren Whitmore, still asleep, felt every muscle tense as she watched the city come alive below. Her phone buzzed constantly with alerts from the financial markets, but she ignored them all. What weighed on her mind wasn't the number. It was the embroidered handkerchief resting on the glass table beside a half-finished glass of wine. The handkerchief was fine linen, stitched with dark blue and gold thread, formed arabesques and tiny flowers. In the corner were the initial M.W. Margaret Whitmore, her mother. Lauren had received it from Evelyn's just 2 days early, during an unexpected visit to the studio. Evelyn hadn't said much. She simply handed over the handkerchief wrapped in tissue, her eyes locked on Lauren's as if she were trying to convey something words could never hold. That morning, Lauren felt a strange urge. She needed to understand what was hidden in that handkerchief. She picked up a magnifying, inspecting every stitch, every curve of the embroidery. That's when she noticed something she had never seen before. Among the flowers were nearly invisible letters, stitched in an even darker thread. They seemed to form words, but they were scrambled like a secret code. Meanwhile, in the studio, Evelyn was preparing to open for the day. The scent of fresh coffee filled the space, mingling with the aroma of old fabric. She knew Lauren would come back. She also knew the handkerchief was only the beginning of something much bigger, a story that needed to be told, but one that would require the young millionaire's courage to uncover. The old phone on the counter rang, its sound echoing among the rolls of fabric and boxes of buttons. Evelyn answered with the calm of someone who had been expecting the call. On the other end, Lauren's voice was hesitant, almost childlike. "Evelyn, can you meet me today? I need to talk about the handkerchief." The seamstress replied with a soft "yeah," her raspy voice carrying a tenderness that was hard to explain. She knew this would be the true beginning of a painful but necessary journey. Lauren left her apartment without makeup, wearing only an oversized coat and dark sunglasses. The driver looked surprised when she asked to be taken to Brook, but he didn't question. During the ride, Lauren replayed fragments of childhood, her mother sewing by hand, the sound of scissors cutting through silence, and the scent of lavender always lingered in the air. They were hazy memories, but now, with the handkerchief in front of her, they took on a startling clarity. In the studio, Evelyn waited in her rock, her hands busy with a new piece of embroidery. When Lauren walked in, the doorbell chimed softly. The two women looked at each other for a long, quiet moment in which everything seemed suspended. Lauren held out the handkerchief, pointing to the hidden letter. "What does this mean? Did she leave a message for me?" Evelyn smiled faint, but her eyes shimmered with a mix of sad pride. Margaret was a woman of secrets, Lauren. Every stitch on this handkerchief was sewn on nights like last night, when the world was asleep and all that remained was the weight of the past. Lauren sat across from her, surrounded by the smell of coffee and old fabric. "Why did you keep it for so long?" "Because your mother asked me to, and because some stories can only be revealed when we're ready to hear them." Silence settled again, as heavy as the fabric on the table. Lauren realized this wasn't just about the handkerchief. It was about everything left unsaid, about loss and secrets woven into threads and needles. candle. Then Evelyn took an old wooden box from the shelf and opened, revealing an aged, leather-bound journal. Yellowed page. "Your mother left more than a handkerchief, Laura. She left a legacy, and it's up to you to decide what to do with." Lauren's heart pounded. The journal seemed to thrum in her hand, as if it held not only memory, but also choices and sorrows she would have to face. In that moment, Lauren felt that the day she had dreaded so much carried not just answers, but also questions she never imagined she would have to ask. The silence in the studio felt almost sacred, broken only by the soft creak of Evelyn's rocking chair under her weight and the faint rust Lauren's finger turning the pages of the old journal. The millionaire, used to the constant noise of meetings, phone calls and parties, felt strangely vulnerable in that cramped space surrounded by stacked fabrics, wooden mannequins, and faded portraits of clients Evelyn had never forgotten. Lauren opened the journal carefully, breathing in the scent of aged paper and a hint of lavender, the same fragrance that clung to her childhood memory. The first pages were filled with sketches of dress, notes about stitching technique, and scattered among them, small phrases written in Margaret Whitmore's steady hand. "For Laura, when the time feels safe," one read, almost illegible in the corner. Evelyn watched each of the young woman's move, quiet attention, her eyes following the subtle tremor in Lauren's hand. For a moment, she remembered the first time Margaret had walked into the studio. Decades ago, a young woman just as restless, but with a hopeful gaze that time and loss hadn't yet dimmed. Evelyn felt her chest tighten, but her face remained calm, as it always did with her client. "My mother used to come here," Lauren asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Evelyn nodded, her gaze fixed on the embroidery in her lap. "Many times, Margaret was a woman full of dreams, but also fear. She trusted the fabrics because she knew they could keep her secrets better than people could." Lauren let out a faint, sad smile. She flipped through more pages. She came across an old photo, taped in with yellowed adhesive. Her mother, still young, sitting beside Evelyn, both smiling for the camera. The contrast between Margaret's youth and Evelyn's already lined face was striking, but there was something in their expression, a quiet bond, an unspoken promise. "Why did my mother never tell me about you?" Lauren, feeling a pang of hurt. Evelyn took a slow breath, choosing her words with care. "Sometimes we protect the people we love from our own ghost. Margaret wanted you to have the chance to find your own path without the weight of her." Lauren closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back tears. The studio seemed to spin around her, as if every object held a fragment of the story she'd never known. "I always thought she was distant, cold, but maybe it was just fear." Evelyn reached out and gently touched Lauren's arm. "Love sometimes hides in the simplest gesture, like a stitch tucked into the back side of the fabric." The seamstress's words echoed in Lauren's heart. She looked around, taking in the details of the studio. Colorful scraps hanging from twine, jars filled with old buttons, spools of thread arranged by color. Everything seemed to carry a story, a memory sewn by hand. "Do you think she loved me, Evelyn?" Lauren asked, her voice unsteady. Evelyn smiled, a small, tender smile. "I have no doubt. Margaret stitched that love into every piece, even when she didn't know how to say it." Time seemed suspended in that little studio. For the first time in years, Lauren felt a real connect, not just to her mother, but also to Evelyn. This quiet woman somehow held the key to her path. Evelyn stood slowly and walked to a high shelf. She took down a carved wooden box draped with a white linen cloth. "There's something else you need to see, something your mother left, but it should only be opened when you're ready." Lauren took the box, trembling hand, feeling the symbolic weight of that moment. "What's inside?" Evelyn just shook her head, her eyes shining. "Only you can find out. But remember, not every secret has to be feared. Some exist to set us free." The clock was nearing noon when Lauren stepped out of the studio, clutching the box to her chest. The sky, once grey, had started to clear, and a shy beam of sunlight slipped through the cloud, lighting the sidewalk by the door. Lauren drew a deep breath, feeling for the first time that she wasn't alone. As she walked toward the car, she turned back and saw Evelyn standing in the doorway, waving softly. The gesture was simple, but it held a promise that even in the face of our deepest fear, there is always someone willing to help stitch our hearts back together. Lauren returned to her Manhattan penthouse with the wooden box pressed tightly against her chest, the symbolic weight of it echoing in every step she took. The driver, always discreet, noticed her unusual silence but didn't dare to ask anything. The ride back felt longer, as if the city, with its skyscrapers and blaring horn, was determined to swallow any attempt at reconciliation between past and present. Once home, Lauren locked herself in her office, ignoring the relentless call of partners and family. The embroidered handkerchief lay on the desk beside her mother's journal. She ran her fingers over the initial MW, felt a stab of long anger. Why had Margaret never told her any of it? Why trust an elderly seam so completely but not her own daughter? The box almost seemed to pulse in her hand. With a hesitant breath, Lauren undid the old clasp and lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters, yellowed with time, all addressed to her but never sent. There was also a small child's dress, carefully folded, embroidered with delicate blue butter, the same design as the hang. Lauren recognized it immediately. It was the dress she wore in the last photo ever taken with her mother before the accident that changed everything. The letter, written in Margaret's elegant handwriting, were a mix of advice, confession, and fragments of family story. In one, Margaret wrote, "If you ever find Evelyn, you'll understand that love can be silent, never absent. Trust her when you can't trust anyone else." Lauren's chest tightened, her throat closing up. The past she had tried so hard to bury beneath layers of success and distance was exploding before her eyes. As she read, silent tears slid down her cheek. Each sentence felt like an open wound, also an invitation. Margaret wrote of impossible choice, forbidden love, of a double life she'd felt forced to lead to protect Lauren from a world of greed and betrayal. There was mention of a man, A, whose identity was unclear but who seemed central to the family's story. Among the letters, a smaller envelope sealed with blue wax caught her attention. On the front, a single line, "Open only when you're ready to forgive." Lauren hesitated. Forgiveness was foreign terror, especially when it came to her mother. She slipped the envelope into her pocket, feeling torn between curiosity and fear. The phone rang again. It was Evelyn. "Lauren, I need to speak with you. Something happened." The seamstress's voice sounded heavy, urgent. Lauren felt her heart slam in her chest. "I'm coming," she answered without thinking. The taxi sped across the bridge to Brook as Lauren tried to gather her thoughts. The sky, once bright, was now threatening rain. In the studio, found Evelyn sitting near the window, her eyes red, hands trembling. On the floor, scraps of torn fabric and spilled spools of thread told the story of some outburst, rage, or desperation. "What happened?" Lauren asked, dropping to her knees beside her. It took Evelyn a moment to reply. "Someone was here this morning. They were searching for someone. They didn't take anything valuable, but they turned everything upside down." She gestured to a fallen frame, its glass shattered and reflecting the grey afternoon light. A chill ran down Lauren's spine. "Do you think this has to do with my mother? With me?" Evelyn nodded, her gaze distant. "Margaret had enemy, powerful people, willing to do anything to keep their secrets buried. You're in danger, Lauren." The weight of it all settled on Lauren like a cold cloak. For the first time, she realized this story wasn't only about reconciliation, it was about survival. Margaret's legacy was more complex and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Evelyn gripped Lauren's hand with unexpected strength. "Don't run. What's coming will take everything you have, and you're not alone." Lauren looked at the seamstress's worn hands and felt a surge of gratitude and fear. "What should I do?" Evelyn's smile was gentle enough to disarm any defense. "First, breathe. Then decide who you trust. And never underestimate the power of a well-kept secret." At the back of the studio, among the torn threads and ruined fabrics, Lauren felt something inside her begin to wake. A part of her that was no longer cold and detached, but ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. If you believe love can transform, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Lauren left Evelyn's studio feeling the weight of every word, every look, every silence that had filled the air between them. The New York sky hung heavy overhead, dense clouds threatening to burst at any moment. The smell of rain mingled with the old fabric scent that still clung to her clothes. She walked the sidewalks of Brook aimless, trying to process everything she had seen and heard. The envelope sealed with blue wax burned in her pocket, like a key to a world she was afraid to unlock. Her mind was a storm. Her mother's past, hidden enemy, the ransacked studio, the letters never sent. For the first time, she realized that money, titles, and invitations to exclusive galas meant nothing compared to the emptiness growing inside her. That feeling of abandonment, of never belonging, had always been there, but now it was impossible to ignore. Margaret's legacy wasn't just wealth, it was also pain, secrets, and choices that came at a steep cost. She wandered into a small park and sat on a damp wooden bench. She watched children play beneath the looming rain, mothers chatting absent, and elderly couples strolling at their own pace. For a moment, she longed for a simple life, far from the spotlight and the suffocating expectation. She took the blue envelope out and turned it over in her hand, feeling the ridges of the wax seal. "Open only when you're ready to forgive." But how could she forgive someone who had left so many questions behind? How could she forgive herself for never trying to understand sooner? Her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Lauren hesitated, then answered. "Lauren Whitmore." The voice was male, cold, emotional. "Yes. "Who is this? I suggest you stop digging into your mother's. Some stories should stay buried. For your own good." The line went dead before she could respond. Fear gripped her, but so did a quiet rage, a resolve not to be intimidated. Lauren looked at the envelope again, knowing that opening it now felt like standing on the edge between courage and recklessness. She returned home, locking every door and window behind. She sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by Margaret's letter, her childhood dread, and the embroidered hank. The silence was almost complete, broken only by the distant sound of rain beginning to fall. Lauren closed her eyes, searching for strength in a place she thought was empty. She thought of Evelyn, of that woman's quiet strength, who, even in fear, had never hesitated to protect her. She thought of her mother, of the gestures of love hidden beneath layers of silence and hurt. She thought of herself, of the child she had been, of the woman she'd become, and of the possibility of finally being whole. With trembling hand, broke the blue wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a short, handwritten letter. "Lauren, I know that one day you'll hate me for everything I left unsaid, but a mother's love isn't measured by the word speaks. It's in the things she does in silence. Forgive me for not being strong enough to face my own fear. If you've come this far, it means you're braver than I ever was. With all the love I could stitch into time. Your mother, Margaret." Lauren read the words over and over, her chest tightening as tears streamed down her face. There were no easy answers, no promises of happiness, only the raw truth, painful but also freeing. She realized forgiveness wasn't a gift for Margaret, it was a gift for herself, a chance to move forward without the weight of resentment. That night, Lauren decided she needed to step away from everything for a while. She called her assistant and asked her to cancel every meet trip. She turned off her phone, drew the curtains closed, and allowed her, for the first time in years, to simply exist. She breathed in the scent of the handkerchief, touched the little dress, reread every letter, felt like stitching a new meaning into her life, thread by thread, with the patience of someone who knows that some hurts can't be mended all at once. In her studio, Evelyn was facing her own ghost. She sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass, remembering Margaret and the promise she had made all those years ago, protect Lauren at any cost. She knew danger was close, that the Whitmore family's enemies were real and relentless, but she also knew that sometimes the greatest enemy was the fear of love, of trust, of starting over. As night fell, Lauren felt a strange calm settle in her chest. It wasn't happiness, but a quiet acceptance that the past couldn't be changed, only understood. Maybe her mother's greatest legacy was the courage to face that history without masks, without running away. She fell asleep, holding the embroidered handkerchief, feeling for the first time that she was no longer alone. The sound of the rain was like a gentle stitching, sewing hope into the cracks of her heart. The night dragged on, heavy and unrelenting, as Lauren Whitmore sat motionless in the dark room, clutching the embroidered handkerchief and her childhood dread. The silence felt dense, but slowly it began to fill with a new determination. The fear that had once paralyzed her now felt like fuel for something larger. She knew she couldn't keep running forever. Her mother's story, secrets now laid bare, and the veiled threat from that phone call all demanded a response, not just to protect her, but to honor Margaret's legacy and Evelyn's quiet courage. When the sun finally rose, painting Manhattan's skyline in gold, Lauren stood up. She took a long shower, as if she were trying to wash away not only the night's sweat, but the invisible marks of the past. She dressed simply, trading her designer clothes, worn jeans and a cotton blouse. She pulled her hair into a loose bun, and before leaving, folded the handkerchief carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. She went down to the kitchen and brewed strong coffee. With every sip, felt her resolve solidify. It was time to face whatever was coming, to search for answers, to stop hiding behind walls of glass and steel. She gathered Margaret's note, the letter, and the blue sealed envelope she had already opened, placing everything in a bag. Before walking out, she left a note for her assistant. "I won't be available today. Don't try to reach me. I have family matters to resolve." The taxi drove across a city still half asleep, carrying Lauren back to Brook. The studio looked different in the morning light, the door ajar, soft brightness filtering in, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the old fabric. She stepped inside, without knock, and found Evelyn seated at her sewing machine, her eyes fixed on a piece of white linen. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon," Evelyn said, without looking up. Lauren sat across from her, setting the bag on the table. "I needed time to understand. Now I know I can't keep running." Evelyn offered a small, teary-eyed smile. "Fear is a difficult fabric to cut, Laura, but once you make the first line, the rest starts to fall into place." They sat in silence for a while, listening only to the rhythmic hum of the sewing. Lauren watched Evelyn's steady hands guiding the cloth with practiced care. It looked as if every stitch was a prayer, a wish for protection, a thread of hope sewn into the passage of time. "Evelyn, who was A?" Lauren finally asked, her voice steady. The seamstress stopped her work, resting her hands on the table. Arthur, he was your mother's great love. A good man, caught up in dangerous affair. Margaret loved him dearly, but she chose to protect you above everything else. That's why she pulled away, why she kept so many secrets. Lauren felt the floor tilt beneath. And is he still alive? Evelyn hesitated, her gaze drifting far away. I don't know. After Margaret died, he disappeared. But I believe if you follow the clue, you might find answers. Just be careful. The same people who threatened Margaret could be watching you now. Lauren took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she was stepping into. I have to know the truth, Evelyn. Not just for me, for my mother. The seamstress nodded and pulled a small envelope from her apron. Margaret left this with. She asked me to give it to you when you were ready. Lauren opened the envelope, found a note with a single sentence. Look for Arthur at the lake. Alongside it was an old key, rusted with time. Her heart thudded in her chest. She knew exactly what it meant. The lake house was a family property, abandoned for years, where she had spent a few childhood summers. It was a place of sweet and bitter memory, of laughter and tear and forgotten promise. I'm going there, Lauren said, her voice resolute. Evelyn took her hand, her eyes filled with worry and affection. Don't go alone. Bring someone you trust. And if you need me, I'll be. Lauren smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. Thank you, Evelyn, for everything. The seamstress simply squeezed her hand, as if stitching an invisible bond between them, one that could never break. Lauren left the studio stronger than she'd ever felt. She got in her car and drove the winding roads to the lake, her heart racing but steady. The drive was lined with towering trees, the lake glinting beneath a sky that promised rain. When she arrived, she parked in front of the old house, the wood groaning under the wind's pressure. She slipped the rusty key into the lock and turned. The door creaked open, releasing the smell of mildew and memory. The inside was dust untouched. Lauren walked through each room, brushing her hand across furniture draped in crooked frame, forgotten books. In the master bedroom, she found a wooden box like the one Evelyn had given her, only larger, secured with a heavy lock. She used the key, and when the lid opened, found letter, photograph, and a journal belonging to Arthur. The first pages spoke of love, fear, choice, and sacrifice. There were mentioned powerful, unspoken threats, and Margaret's final decision to protect their daughter, no matter the cost. As she read, a noise echoed from downstairs. Fear rushed back, but she forced herself to stay calm. She walked down slowly, her heart hammering in her chest. In the living room, a man stood waiting. Gray hair, tired posture, eyes full of something. Instantly wrecked. Lauren, the voice was soft, weighted with emotion. She knew, without any doubt, that it was Arthur. Their reunion was quiet, but intense. Arthur told her how he had loved Margaret, how he had tried to keep her safe, how disappearing was the only way to protect them both. He revealed names, histories, dangers, still very real. Lauren listened to it all, absorbing each word like she was sewing, stitch by stitch, the frayed fabric of her own story. When it was over, she felt lighter, not because all the threats had vanished, but because finally she knew the truth, and with it came the possibility of beginning again. The lake, wrapped in the hush of early morning, and the trembling reflect trees on the water, felt like a place suspended in time. Lauren and Arthur sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by dusty mugs and the sweet scent of old wood. Their reunion, heavy with emotion and hesitation, was also a reckoning with everything they'd lost. Years apart, words unspoken, gazes that were only now meeting in honesty. Arthur opened the journal in front of Lauren, showing her pages filled with a steady handwriting that had grown fragile over time. There were accounts of nights spent in fear, secret meetings with Margaret, failed attempt to shield the family from the threats hanging over. Lauren read every line as if searched desperately for meaning in her own past. Your mother was braver than anyone ever knew, Arthur said, his voice unsteady. She sacrificed everything so you could have a chance to live without fear. Tears streamed down Lauren's face, but she didn't try to stop. For the first time, she felt no shame in showing her vulnerability. Why didn't you ever come for me? Her voice trembled. Arthur lowered his head, shoulders weighed down by decades of regret. Because they promised that if I disappeared, you and Margaret would be safe. I couldn't risk every letter I wrote, every memory I held on to. That was all I had left. Time seemed to dissolve between the past and present, weaving together into a single, fragile fabric. Lauren pulled the embroidered handkerchief from her pocket, showed Arthur the initial, the blue butterfly. My mother made. Evelyn said every stitch held a secret. Arthur smiled soft, touching the cloth as though it were something sacred. Margaret used to say sewing was her way of praying. Every stitch was a promise, every thread a plea for forgiveness. As they talked, Lauren noticed a small tag sewn onto the back of the handkerchief, almost invisible. Carefully, she unpicked a few stitches and discovered a tiny key hidden between between the layers of fabric. It looked ancient, but it gleamed under the gentle morning light. "What is this?" Lauren asked, startled. Arthur went pale. "It's the key to the bank vault. Margaret never told me where she hid it. She said that if you ever found it, it meant you were ready to face everything." Chill passed through Lauren. The vault was a legend in the family, rumored to hold documents could ruin reputation, secret contracts, evidence of blackmail, and perhaps the true origins of the Whitmore fortune. The choice to open it or not felt like a cross. She knew that if she did, she might uncover truths that could never be hidden again, and consequences that could never be undone. "What if I don't want to?" she whispered, looking at Arthur. "Then keep the key. The power to decide is yours, Lord. Your mother wanted to choose your own fate." The moment was shattered by a crash at the front door. Lauren and Arthur exchanged a terrified look. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Lauren shoved the key into her pocket as Arthur stood, ready to protect the daughter of the woman he had loved. The kitchen door burst open. A tall man in a dark suit, his expression cold and unyielding, stepped inside, flanked by 2 security guards. "Miss Whitmore," he said sharp, "we need to talk. The family council demands an explanation for your investigation. There are things here that must remain buried." Lauren felt her blood run cold. The family council had always been a shadow, relatives and business partners who controlled the Whitmore Empire's image and power. She knew that standing up to them meant defying centuries of tradition. "I'm not afraid of you," Annie said, her voice steady. "The truth doesn't stay buried forever." The man stepped closer, trying to loom over her. "Think carefully, Lord. What's at stake isn't just your reputation, it's the safety of everyone around." Arthur moved between them, his presence unwavering. "If you lay a hand on her, you'll answer to me first." The tension was suffocating, but Lauren felt something new rising inside her. Fear was still there, but it was smaller now, no match for her need for justice. "If my mother gave everything to protect, I won't waste this chance. I'm going to open that vault, and if there are crimes or betrayals, I will bring them to light." The man recoiled, startled by the steel in her voice. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "No," Lauren said calmly, "but I know who I am." For the first time, "That's enough." The guards hesitated. Realizing he wouldn't be able to intimidate, the man turned and walked out, leaving a silent threat hanging in the air. Quiet returned, dense but late, glimmer of hope. Arthur pulled Lauren into a hug, their tears mingling. "Your mother would be proud of." Lauren smiled, feeling a cert she had never known, that she was finally the author of her own story, no longer a pawn on her family's board, but someone strong enough to stitch her own destiny, one thread at a time, no matter how afraid she was. The lake house, now wrapped in the hush of late afternoon, and the soft shimmer of trees reflected on the water, seemed to exhale relief after all the tension. Lauren and Arthur sat together for a long time, side by side, listening only to the distant sound of the waves and the rustle of leaves. The confrontation with the family council still echoed in their mind, but something had shifted. The feeling of powerlessness had given way to a steady calm, as if, by daring to face the past, Lauren had finally carved out space for healing. She looked at Arthur, his lined face marked by time, but his eyes still bright with a tenderness only the years can refine. "Thank you for never giving up," Lauren said, her voice raw but steady. Arthur smiled, running a hand over his graying hair. "Your mother taught me that true love never gives up, and you've shown me that forgiveness is possible, even when everything feels lost." For the first time, Lauren felt her anger and resentment start to melt away. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't some grand gesture. It was a series of small moments, a look, a touch, a shared silence. She let herself cry, not from pain, but from relief, as Arthur held her with the gent, someone who knows some wounds only time can mend. As night fell, Lauren knew she needed to return to Brook to see Evelyn. She got in the car, her heart beating with a mix of anticipation and gratitude. On the drive, thought about everything that had happened over the last few days. Her mother's letters, her reunion with Arthur, the confrontation with the council, key hidden inside the embroidered handkerchief. It felt as if all the pieces were finally coming together, forming a mosaic of memory, loss, and reunion. Evelyn's studio was glowing with warm light, spilling out through the cracks of the door. Lauren walked in, without knocking, found Evelyn sitting at the table, working on a dark blue dress. Her hands moved with practiced precision, but there was a faint tremor in her motion. Maybe from fatigue, maybe from emotion. "I needed to see you," Lauren, sitting across. Evelyn looked up, smiling tender. "I knew you'd come back, and I knew you'd bring something new with." Lauren pulled the tiny golden key from her pocket, placed it on the table. "I found this in the handkerchief my mother embroidered. Arthur told me everything, and I forgave him." Evelyn's face bright, her eyes glistening with feeling. Margaret always believed forgiveness was the final stitch in every great story. She sewed that key in because she knew that one day you'd need it to unlock not just vault, but your own heart. Lauren smiled, feeling understood in a way she never had before. "I thought I was strong, because I never showed weak, but now I see real strength is admitting we need others. Evelyn reached across the table and took her hand, her rough palms warm against Lauren's smooth skin. We're all made of scraps, Lauren. The secret is learning how to stitch the pieces together, even the ones that hurt. They sat quiet, sharing a rare piece. Then Evelyn stood and walked to a high shelf. She returned with a parcel wrapped in blue tissue paper. Your mother asked me to keep. She said to give it to you when the circle felt complete. Lauren opened the package carefully, revealing a formal dress embroidered with golden and blue threads in the same butterfly pattern as the hank. It was delicate and beautiful, but what struck her most was the line there. Margaret had hand-stitched a letter. My lord, if you've come this far, it means you've found the courage to face the truth. This dress is a symbol of all I live and all I dreamed for you. Wear it when you feel ready to begin again. With love, Mom. Lauren wept, clutching the dress to her chest, feeling maybe for the first time, truly loved. Evelyn wrapped her in a silent embrace, like a grandmother comforting a granddaughter who had finally found her way home. You're not alone. You never were. That night, Lauren slept in the studio, feeling completely at peace. The smell of fabric, the distant hum of the sewing machine, and the warmth of Evelyn's embrace were all around, soft and reassuring, as if time itself had finally stitched together all the loose pieces of her story. Morning arrived gently over Brooke, carrying a coolness that felt like a promise of new beginning. Evelyn's studio, bathed in the golden light of the sun, was filled with the familiar aroma of fresh coffee and pressed fabric. Lauren woke on the small sofa, still clutching the dress Margaret had embroidered. For a moment, felt like a child again, sheltered by a love finally understood in its entirety. Evelyn was already up, making breakfast. The clink of silverware, the scent of toasted bread, the warmth of the stove. Everything was simple, yet filled with meaning. Lauren rose slowly, her bare feet meeting the cool floor, and walked to the kitchen. Did you sleep well? Evelyn asked with a welcoming smile. Better than I have in years, Lauren replied, sitting at the table. Here, everything feels more real, more true. Evelyn poured the coffee and sat beside her. Home isn't built from walls or wealth, Lauren. It's built from people, from story, from bonds that outlast time. Lauren turned that over in her mind as she sipped her coffee. For the first time, felt no urgency. There were no meetings waiting, no inescapable obligation, just the present, whole and quiet. You know, Evelyn, I thought I had to conquer the world to matter, but now I see what I was really missing was a place to belong. The seamstress's eyes glistened pride. You've always belonged, Laura. You just needed to remember. They spent the morning together, organizing fabric, sorting through boxes of old talking about life. Lauren helped Evelyn tidy the studio, folding scraps, arranging spools of thread by color. Every gesture felt like a quiet celebration of this new bond taking shape between them. Not simply client and seamstress anymore, but chosen family, woven together by love and respect. Early in the afternoon, Arthur arrived, carrying fresh flowers and wearing a hesitant smile. Lauren welcomed him with a tight hug, feeling finally that the pieces of her life were finding their place. I came to say thank you, Arthur said, looking at Evelyn, for taking care of my family when I couldn't. Evelyn simply nodded, her expression soft with emotion. What we do out of love doesn't need recognition, it's enough to know we did our part. Sitting there, in those humble walls, Lauren realized she had found what she'd been searching all along: acceptance, forgiveness, and a chance to start over. She decided then that she would use the key to the vault, not to protect old secrets, but to free the family from the burden of the past. She and Arthur agreed to go to the bank together the next morning, ready to face whatever waited, now as allies. Before evening settled in, Lauren slipped into the dress her mother had made. She stood before the mirror in the studio, feeling herself wrapped in a new kind of energy. The dress, more than just clothing, was a symbol of everything she had overcome: fear, loneliness, guilt. Evelyn knelt to adjust the hem with her steady hand, smiling up. Your mother would be so proud, Lauren. You turned all that pain into something beautiful. Lauren's eyes shimmered and smiled back. I could only do it because I had you beside. That night, the studio filled with friends and neighbors. Evelyn, beloved in the neighborhood, proudly introduced Lauren as family. There was laughter, shared stories, soft drifting through the air, and Lauren understood that even without blood ties, there was here a web of affection and belonging stronger than any fort. Toward the end of the eve, Evelyn handed Lauren a small pattern filled with notes and sketches gathered over decades. I want you to have. It's my legacy to you, so you'll always remember where you came from and where you can still go. Lauren hugged her tight, feeling at last that she truly had a home, not just a place, but a feeling. Thank you, Evelyn, for everything. As the city drifted off to sleep, Lauren stood by the studio window, her heart light. She knew the future would still bring challenges, but she was no longer afraid. Together, She, Evelyn, and Arthur had stitched a new story made of forgiveness, love, and hope. The sun rose bright over New York, flooding Brooklyn with an energy that felt like a new beginning. Lauren woke early, the embroidered dress still hanging on the chair by the bed, a silent reminder of everything she'd overcome. Evelyn's pattern book rested on the table, next to Margaret's letters and the little golden. Felt as though all the fragments of her story had finally come together. That morning, Lauren and Arthur headed to the bank, weaving through Manhattan's busy street. The family vault, locked away for decades, was like a time cap, a reliquary of secrets, documents, and photographs. Lauren felt a mix of anxiety and calm as she turned the key in the lock. When she opened, she found not only old papers and contracts, but an envelope with her name written in Margaret's hand. Inside was a letter and a faded newspaper clip. Margaret explained, with disarming honesty, the origins of the Whitmore fortune, the mistakes made by generations before her, and the sacrifices she had shouldered to protect the family. But more than secrets or justification, the letter held a plea that Lauren use the power she inherited to transform, not to perpetuate injustice. My daughter, true legacy isn't what we lock away in vaults. It's what we inspire in people's hearts. May you be a bridge, never a wall. May you stitch lives together, never cut them apart. With love, Mom. Lauren closed her eye, feeling the weight and the lightness of those words all at once. She looked at Arthur, who nodded silent and knew exactly what she needed to do. Instead of hiding the incriminating information, Lauren chose to come forward, responsibly exposing the unethical practices of the past, working with authority and driving real reform family's business. It wasn't easy. She faced resist, threat, and wary glance, but with Arthur, Evelyn, and a growing circle of allies, she succeeded in transforming the Whitmore empire into a model of ethics and social responsibility. Evelyn's studio became a haven of learning and belonging. With Lauren's support, it grew into a community space offering free sewing workshops to women in vulnerable situations. Soon, the neighborhood no longer saw it as just a shop. It was a ref for anyone who needed to start over. Evelyn, brimming with pride, taught old techniques, passing on stories and secrets stitched into every piece. Lauren, now known not only as an heiress, but as a leader and catalyst for change, finally felt whole. The dress Margaret had embroidered became a symbol of her journey. Displayed in exhibits, it inspired other women to stitch their own stories of resilience. One special afternoon, Lauren hosted an event at the studio, gathering neighbors, former employees, and young apprentices. She wore the butterfly dress, read Margaret's letter aloud, and publicly thanked Evelyn for the quiet love that had helped sew her life back together. If I can start over today, Lauren said, her voice breaking with emotion, it's because I had the courage to face the past without fear, and because, in every stitch, I found a reason to believe that love is always the strongest thread. The room erupted in applause, many people wiping away tears. Evelyn, sitting in the front row, smiled proudly, holding the pattern book like a precious treasure. At the end of the event, Lauren invited everyone to share their own story, encouraging comments, suggestions, and fresh ideas for the studio's future and for the channel. I'd love to hear what you thought of this story, she said, looking into the camera. Leave your comments below, share topics you'd like us to explore next, and of course subscribe so you don't miss any of the moments we'll create together. And so, among threads, needles, and hearts woven back together, Lauren and Evelyn continued side by side, proving that a true home is built from connect, not wall, and that the most valuable legacy is the one that changes lives. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Let me know what you thought of this story. Suggest ideas for our next video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.